Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. Today, my guest is Judith Apshago, who's the Capital CIO of the Year Enterprise ORBIE Award winner. And Judith's leadership talents were recognized in this big way in 2018 when she was chosen from a group of 88 nominees to receive this prestigious award. And in the same year, she received the Norma Passionate Philanthropist Award as well. And this ORBIE Award recognizes technology executives for leadership, innovation, and excellence. When she was the vice president and chief information officer of U.S. Silica, a leading producer of performance materials and industrial minerals and last mile logistics. At U.S. Silica, Judith spearheaded IT and digital transformation to support the company's rapid and substantial growth. She led a company-wide technology modernization, shifted IT from a utility provider to a high-performing strategic business partner, integrated multiple acquired companies, and collaborated with business leaders on strategic initiatives that enabled scalability, drove business efficiencies, and provided market differentiation. There's a couple key things that I want you to know about Judith. Number one is she brought up this concept of a board. She had really achieved quite a bit at U.S. Silica, and then decided that she wanted to really continue to expand herself and went to an opportunity that was actually much bigger than where she was at U.S. Silica, and that's Amtrak. And a previous mentor of hers brought her on board at Amtrak when they were going through some huge revolutionary changes, and they really needed someone of her caliber to be on that team. And so I want you to learn how Judith looks at really tough challenges. She developed a team of mentors and developed a personal board of directors to address career challenges, changes, business challenges that she faced as an IT leader. And I'm a big proponent of this board of directors approach. And you can listen to her talk about that. We talked about what she believes is importance of collaboration and understanding people and building relationships, and how you communicate your personal vision within the context of the overall organization, how you gain support from the top down, and what were her critical learning moments in her career, and the importance of getting support and having someone that really, really believes in you, how to reduce fear in an organization, how to improve business processes as a focal point within an organization, and not letting perfect be the enemy of good enough, and why you must think like a customer to understand the impact of IT on critical customer-facing services. So I believe these are some great learning points that you will get, and I think it's important as you have an ambition to do something different or changes you want to make, or you just want to be better within your current position that you are, that you get a chance to see how others approach their careers and how they themselves are looking at taking on big challenges and continuing to develop and grow. So with that, I want to introduce you to my conversation with Judith Apshago. Well, Judith, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am super interested in how you got started in IT. Maybe if you just take us back to as far back as you'd like, maybe back to high school or college. Like, did you know you were going to be in IT from day one, or did this kind of morph through college? Like, what was the genesis of you getting into technology?
I did not know that I would take an IT path, but I always knew I wanted to run my own show. At the time, I thought it was run my own business, but I think you can interpret that in a lot of different ways. And that's still in the back of my mind, maybe one day. But no, IT not specifically. I always, in my childhood and throughout my education, was focused on math and problem solving.
Okay.
And in college, I studied math and finance, and then moved into early in my career process improvement. And this was in the days where technology wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is today. But naturally, when you look at improving a process, you look at, okay, how can we make it more efficient? And that is what led me into technology.
Okay. So do you think that process is still paramount? Is that the way your brain works when you look at the kind of a macro problem? Are you trying to chunk it into smaller pieces right away?
I always think of it like a puzzle.
Okay.
And I've always loved puzzles. In fact, every holiday, Thanksgiving, that's the tradition. We do a big
1,000-piece puzzle?
Yes. Yes. In fact, in Ohio, this Thanksgiving, that was the big challenge. We had about 20 pieces left. My husband said, it's time to leave. And I said, no, I have to finish the puzzle. But yeah, I always think of it as a puzzle. You have all these pieces, they need to fit together. There's typically one way they fit together best.
Sure. And
so the problem solving and how do we put all these pieces together to achieve kind of what the outcome is or the goal?
So what happens if you jump into something that is already in place or in the midst of, it's sort of like the car's moving and you got to change the tires on a moving car. Mm-hmm. But obviously in business, it's not just the tires because there's just 4, there could be a lot of them. How do you approach something that's kind of, the ship's already sailed mm-hmm. and you're trying to kind of fix it as it's going?
Yeah, that's not unusual, unfortunately. You have to keep the wheels on the bus while we're, getting the oil changed and doing all the other things to make it run more efficiently. So, it's always a challenge. But I think whenever you're in an IT leadership role, you're balancing the kind of day-to-day support and operations with now how do we make things better? How do we improve? Yeah. And a lot of it is the communication, the coordination, and, we talked about process. I think understanding the impact, as we're making these changes, what impact will that have on keeping the kind of day-to-day operations going, keeping the wheels on the bus? So I think just understanding the impact, communicating, making sure that you're not making decisions in a vacuum becomes critical.
So you were a math and finance major mm-hmm. at a college. And then what was your first job?
My first real job, I was at a bank for a little bit, but my first real job was with the Department of Defense. Okay. And it was in the Clinton-Gore era, all about reinventing government. And I was brought in straight out of college to look at one particular agency within DoD that provided services to other agencies in what was called a fee-for-service model. So we basically charged other agencies to provide them administrative support. And the charter was make this less costly than private industry. Oh. So for other government agencies to come to us for their IT services, for their HR services, their finance services, we need to be competitive with private industry. So we were looking at, how do we cut waste? How do we make things more efficient? And actually, I still have a small pewter hammer, which was called the Hammer Award at the time, which was one of the big Clinton-Gore programs to see, how can we cut waste out of government.
Interesting. So you started in government then? Was mm-hmm. it, or was it a third party? Was it a?
It was DoD.
It was DoD. And mm-hmm. then, so how did you migrate out of government, and why? Mm-hmm. Why did you move?
So I was there about 4 years, and then I was contacted by one of the big consulting firms at the time, Coopers & Lybrand. Sure. And before the merger with Pricewaterhouse, and had the opportunity to do actually much the same of what I was doing internally to the government, but to do it, as a consultant and do it across multiple organizations. And I thought that sounded pretty exciting. I was young and didn't mind the travel. Sure. So I went to Coopers, survived the merger with Pricewaterhouse, and was doing a lot of consulting back to the government as well as private industry around process improvement and around automation. Okay, so you, I'll put this in the intro, but you're an ORBIE Award winner. Yes. So what led you to? What was the job right before you went to US Silica? Yes. So I was with the life sciences industry, biotech. For a number of years. Actually left consulting and went to a life sciences company and was in project management. And that led me to IT leadership roles. And prior to US Silica, I was with Sigma Aldrich, but landed there through multiple acquisitions and divestitures in the life sciences industry. Now, how important is it that in today, when you're changing and transforming and changing mm-hmm. processes, and how important is fear in an organization? Like when you're actually in looking at processes, how do you navigate multiple different people and departments mm-hmm. and heads that might have been involved in systems for a long time? How do you navigate that of building, not necessarily
friends, but of building alliances with people that are you're really going to need to be on your side of the fence for doing this.
Yeah, I think the relationship building is key. I think it's been probably one of the keys to a lot of the successes throughout my career, and it's also what I'm working to do here at my current role is build those relationships, those alliances, the go-to people that I have trust, who have faith in what I can do and what I can lead, but also who I can in turn ask to help champion change, help me lead and drive, help me influence others.
Sure.
So I think those relationships are key. I mean, it goes so far to trying to get things accomplished when someone's on your side and will kind of help drive as your partner versus trying to pull them along. It just takes a lot more energy and effort.
Is there anything that you do that's unique to relationship building? And the reason I'm asking is that sometimes unique abilities, sometimes in a unique ability, you do it so naturally that people are like, well, that's amazing. She has great relationship building skills. So it comes so that it's hard to articulate it. But if there is anything that you do in that process that you do like consciously, I'd be curious to know what it is that you do specifically about relationship building. Like, do you have collaborative dinners? Is it just, what do you think about that?
Part of it I think just comes naturally. I'm fairly even keeled. I don't get too emotional or excited about too many things. I have pretty thick skin. So I'll try and take the higher road. And if I need to, I'm okay to let someone else be in the limelight if that helps them feel, like it gives them the attention that helps build that relationship. I think a lot of it is around understanding people, understanding what makes them tick, understanding what their kind of key goals and objectives are, and making sure whatever you're presenting aligns with that. I think the common front, being able to connect on some level, whether it's how do I support you? How do I make you successful? What can I provide to you? Try and find some way to connect with that person, or personal connections. Do we have a common friend? Did we go to the same school? And so I think trying to find those personal connections first, and then trying to parlay that into, okay, now how can I help you?
So you're not saying this is my agenda, we need to make this happen, and sort of like line up my way or the highway. You're completely trying to find out what it is their unique wins are and how can you serve them and their needs. And they're obviously picking up on that as a major kind of thesis of how you operate.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because I think if I go to them with what I need, I'm much less likely to get what I need.
To build that consensus.
I think it's more, okay, what can we achieve together? You have goals, I have goals. Can we find a common purpose, and can we work together to try and achieve something that's of mutual benefit?
Okay. And how important is it in the success you've had to have a CEO have your back, or some senior, either board or somebody that has be on your side, or have be the sponsor? Has that been important as you're making these bigger changes?
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of these transformational changes have to have support from the top. People need to know that the whole organization is aligned around this. So to me, the biggest thing is building credibility. I think you get that confidence through delivery and through success. You have to be able to instill confidence. So they're not going to support something they don't believe in. So I need to be able to convince them that, hey, it's the right thing to do, and I'm the right person to lead it, and we will be successful. But here's what we need to make that success happen, and here's where I need your support. I've been pretty successful at being able to do that once people understand, why we're doing it, what we need, and they have the confidence that we can achieve what we're looking to do.
Do you have a unique way of positioning what you're trying to achieve? So how do you paint the vision of what the overall goal is, so that, are you just matching to the organizational goal? Like the organization is going in this direction, and then you're helping to kind of reinterpret that for each business as far as what technology is going to do? How do you approach that?
I think that you have to find something to connect it to. So obviously IT has to be aligned with the business, and we need to be doing things that support the overall company goals. So to be able to make that connection and that link to show, here's how my goal ties to your goal. This is what we're going to enable, whether it's revenue growth, or it's efficiencies, or it's connecting with the customers better, improving that experience, whatever those goals are for the company, mine should really truly align with that, and to be able to illustrate that either graphically or through some type of illustration to show how it's connected, how it's tied together, and why it's important. I think that's key.
So has there been any milestones where you've been like seminal moments of your career so far that we've talked a little bit before we got started about kind of some stepping stones? Has there been any like real important inflection points that you can point to saying this was a big moment and this was a big moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, early in my career, so I talked about process improvement. That's sort of been the theme throughout my career. And I really started in project management. And when I was early in my career, I was given the opportunity to, actually a couple of opportunities. When I was with DOD and I had just started coming right out of school, my boss at the time had me presenting to 4-star generals. And I'm thinking, here I am, 22 years old, in front of these very intimidating 4-star generals talking about how we can do things more efficiently. So I think that very early in my career, the confidence that she had in me and the ability for me to present in that forum. And that was sort of repeated later, but still quite a while ago, with a large project that my boss, when I was in the life sciences within Vitrogen, gave me the opportunity to lead the largest project that company had taken on in the IT arena. And it was a global project, 50 countries, massive infrastructure upgrade. And I had never done anything like that before. And he brought me in his office and said, I'd like you to lead this project so I can sleep better at night. And I kind of chuckled inside and said, okay, I'm not getting any sleep, but I'm glad you're sleeping well. But it went very well. And that confidence that he instilled in me, I think, gave me the ability that project went very well. It was recognized by our CIO, who then asked me to go to one of our business units that we had acquired and take on some challenges there to lead another difficult project, which also led to another stepping stone. She then soon after offered me an IT director role, which ultimately became the beginning of my career in various IT leadership roles, CIO and other. So I think, that confidence that those leaders gave me early in my career that said, hey, they have faith that I can do this.
Sure.
Gave me the push, I guess, to make sure that I did succeed. And, I wanted to please them because they had so much confidence in me. And I think that ultimately led me to where I am now.
That's great. And so has it always been one success after another, or have you, I think sometimes it's when people look at somebody like you, they're like, okay, she's ringing the bell of some big accomplishments, but has there ever been any challenging opportunities where you've had to recontextualize everything and be like leading through harder times? And I'm wondering if you could share with us any stories relative to that, and maybe how you turn things around.
Sure. Actually, not that long ago, at my previous company, we had a very large transformation project. We had acquired a company that became the fastest growing business unit at US Silica, and we were integrating. The company was started as a small mom and pop shop and was growing very quickly, and their processes were very quickly being outgrown. So we needed to bring them onto our standard enterprise systems and then build some platforms so that they could automate a lot of what was being done, either manually or on paper or through spreadsheets. And this was a major transformation effort that was really going to change this company, but there was a lot of pressure to get it done quickly. And so this was about a year-long project, quite costly, and we had a vendor on board to help us. And we were a couple weeks away from go live and feeling that we weren't quite ready, but lots of pressure from the top, lots of reasons why we needed to push this project along. We got to the go, no-go decision right in the midst of Hurricane Harvey. If you remember the scale of that in Houston. We had just lost a key team member. Our technical lead from the vendor had actually very unexpectedly passed away. And then we also had, when we went through, what issues do we have still open? We had what we called a red issue, one of our, must fix critical issues, but the team felt confident we can fix it within a week. And this red issue prevented us from being able to invoice customers. So we said, okay, well, we don't invoice till the end of the month. We'll get it done in a week. We'll be fine. So we collected the business IT and we made this decision. But I think the decision at the time was really made based on a lot of pressure. We have to go live. We can't wait. People were really focused on family and safety during the middle of a hurricane, but we said we're going live. So we went live with this large project, bringing them onto our core ERP platform with integration to various systems. And it was a disaster. It was not good. We couldn't invoice customers. The 1 week issue turned into 3 or 4 weeks. processes. People hadn't been properly trained. We had a lot of folks out of the office because they were, taking care of their own personal situations. So in the end, it was not the right decision, but we learned that the hard way. We quickly regrouped and said, okay, now how do we get past this? We put together a recovery plan. We brought in extra bodies to help process things manually until we could get everyone trained and get kind of over the hump. But ultimately we did. About 2 months it took to really get into steady state and get past that. And the big lesson learned was, hey, next time let's sort of listen to the experts. And if we don't feel we're quite ready, if we have other variables that were unexpected, let's make the tough call. And while we may have other pressures, and in this case, in addition to the political pressures, we also have compliance concerns because being a public company, we had to be compliant within a year of the acquisition. So fast forward about a year, we had another large project, same business unit, but very strategic, where we were automating soup to nuts, a lot of different processes, and weren't quite ready, had our go, no go. A lot of things were going well, but we just really weren't quite ready.
Yeah.
So we made the tough call to delay the project 2 months, and people weren't happy about it, but we reminded them. Remember a year ago?
Lessons learned.
So we delayed the project 2 months, went live. I'd say a month later, nobody remembered that we were 2 months late. It went very well. People were prepared. All the right things happened, and it was the opposite of the prior experience. So
Sure.
I think those kind of learning moments in an organization wasn't just IT. I think the whole company learned, sometimes you do have to make those tough calls. And when we do fall, we need to quickly regroup, put a plan together, execute that plan, and then move on and apply those lessons next time.
It's interesting this because it can generate a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this a lot with the CIOs that I talk to, is that they take a hit, however it is. It could be on a scale of 0 to 10, like a 10 hit or a 1 or 2, but they're taking the 1, 2, and 3 hits, and they're making them 10s in their own mind. So it makes them like gun shy, like to take risks and to push the envelope, and like all of a sudden they lose confidence in taking the shot. Like in a basketball game, they're a great 3-point shooter and they just lose confidence. And it's, how do you balance crossing the I's and dotting the T's with actually taking some project risk?
And, it's a very good question. One of my early leaders and mentors in my career said to me, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. And that has resonated for my entire career because I'm a perfectionist by nature. And I'm also very analytical by nature. And I like to have all the answers.
Being math, right?
Exactly.
It's not like you can get like, you're not even an English major, it's like,
right.
Well, I can potentially get this paragraph right. No, we got to get the math right. I mean, there's no two answers.
1 + 1 = 2. Yes. So, my tendency is to want to know all the details, to want to know all the answers, to make sure it's perfect. So I had to adjust my way of thinking. And actually, that was feedback I received later in my career from a manager at the time, that I have to get comfortable with making decisions without having all the information or all the answers. As you move up the chain, you're not going to be able to have all those details. So you have to get comfortable. But I think the flip side is, that balance of when do you need the details? What are the critical decisions where you actually do need to dot all those I's and cross the T's? And when can you afford to take a little more risk? And I think there are times, is it a safety concern? Is it a compliance concern? Or is it just, okay, we might not make as much money. We might not be quite as efficient. We might not, get quite the satisfaction score. So I think somewhere there's a really fine balance. Sometimes it's a little difficult to find.
So is there like and this might be something that you just do naturally now, so you don't have like probably, I might not have been asked this question, but is there like a meter internally that you're using? For example, this decision is going to impact customers, so I'm going to pun intended, I'm going to slow the train down a little bit.
Right.
Because we're coming up against customers, or is it this is an internal system that might have some upset end users, but I got to make it because it leads to the next. Is there that type of a thing you run through?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, even here at Amtrak, I had soon after starting, I had a decision we had to make around do we go or not. And it was one of those where we needed ideally another few weeks, but we were a little bit past the point of no return because of some other decisions that had already been made. So we made a calculated decision to say, look, there's risk either way.
Okay.
Which is the greater risk, which is the lesser of the two evils.
Okay.
And so I don't know about that gut meter. I think sometimes you have to rely on the gut meter, and sometimes you have to just look at, is this going to impact, external facing customers,
Sure.
or is this just some inconvenience to our internal, which is still important. Our internal customers are still important, but our external perceptions weigh a little heavier.
Yeah. So how important it seems like some of the decisions you made have been kind of one challenge has led to the next challenge, has led to the next challenge. Like, have you always been up for the challenge in the sense that you wanted that early on? Or is that just something that you just think the growth as a leader, it just invigorates you in the role you're in?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'd say that my passion really has always been around how to make things better. Okay. And particularly since I got into IT, how do I improve things with technology? How do we enable? How do we leverage technology to make business better? So that's been a bit of a driver, I'd say, throughout my career. But I think it's also a little bit of success breeds success, opportunities breed opportunities. People see what you can do and say, hey, can you try this? So I'd say it's probably a combination of the two. Okay.
That's interesting. So as we look at mentoring a little bit more, so I always find this really fascinating because I say to the folks that are involved in the innovation group, the CIOs, like, who are your closest peers? And I said, if your ambition is to handle big projects and to be XYZ type of a CIO, who are your composite friend group? Is it people just like you, or do you have? And so with this, you and I talked a little bit about mentorship and finding people. And I was wondering if you can give what's your lens around mentorship and what it's meant to you at different stages of your career?
Yeah. So I think looking at that two different ways. One is being mentored and the other is being the mentor to others.
Okay, good point.
So I think the first is, and it's interesting because I was recently, between roles, my prior company, US Silica, moved to Houston. I chose to stay in the DC area. And so I was looking for my next opportunity. And I was talking to someone in my network, and he said, you need your personal board of directors. And I never really thought of it that way, but it made a lot of sense. And he said, you need this trusted group of people that you can go to when you're making a key life decision like this, where do I go next? Or you have a particular challenge at work and there's no one there you can talk to about it because there's either politics or there's other reasons why you might not be comfortable. So you need that board of directors, those trusted people you can go to. And I thought about it. And I thought, I actually do have that. I've never thought of it that way. But I have this group of folks I've collected over the years that I've built those relationships with that I know even if I haven't talked to them for a couple of years, I can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, what do you think? And they will spend an hour or two or however long it takes to listen and give me that advice. And, there's different folks on my board of directors that I call for different reasons. There's some that I know are really good at large-scale ERP implementations and others that are just really good at strategy and thinking differently or building those operations relationships. So, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to make a lot of those connections had a lot of those mentors throughout my career. And then on the flip side, then I think, because I'm so fortunate, I want to pay that forward and be able to mentor others. So I naturally do that. I think most of us do as leaders through just our relationships with our subordinates, the folks that we're working with every day. And so I try and help groom and mentor and help them grow, help them see opportunities. Succession planning here is very important. So try and look for who are those potential successors, what gaps do they have, how do I help them fill those gaps, and is this one of their aspirations? Is it something they want to do? How can I help them get there? And I think beyond that, I'm still reaching back to folks I worked with at my previous company that are calling me and saying, hey, can you be a sounding board? So I'm trying to be on the board of directors now for some of those folks who I think could benefit from
It's interesting. I think today's day and age, to take on some of the bigger challenges, some people think, well, I need a mentor, but this aspect of them, I'm not really sure I like. This aspect of them, I'm not really sure. It's not like they dislike, it's just that it doesn't match to where you want to go either personally. Like maybe they don't do something with their kids the way you would do something with their kids. And my whole lens, find an element of what they do. We're multifaceted human beings. Find something that you find is extraordinary. It doesn't have to be the whole, like every aspect of their life. Just find something that you can say, that's something that I can shoot for down the road. But when you are actually facing a big problem, the reason I formed my board of directors is I wanted to do some bigger things. And I pulled people that had done very big things. And then I can pull on them for finance. I can pull on someone who's the ex-CIO. She was the ex-CIO of Johnson & Johnson. So she was the CIO of 100 CIOs. Every one of those CIOs ran $1 billion business unit. So I can pull Karen into a conversation about strategy and about technology. But then there's like different elements of mentorship that cover all aspects of us as human beings. I think that's really powerful when you're taking on new positions, to be able to have sort of this you surround yourself with this virtual team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's so important because sometimes I think, going back to the fear comment you made earlier, I think sometimes we're also afraid to admit we don't know something, or afraid to show that we don't know something. So to have those trusted advisors who, I might be in a position here where I'm being asked to do something I haven't done before, or bigger than we talked about scale before the interview, about just the size and scale of this role compared to some of my prior roles, and not having done some of these things. Who can I pick up the phone and call and say, hey, how have you handled this in the past? What did you do? Or I have this particular challenge. How would you suggest I handle that? And in fact, one of my mentors, who is still very much in my group, in the pool, and gave great advice when I was, midst career trying to decide where to go next. She was a consultant with a large firm. She's now actually back to being a CIO. And I know she had seen a lot of different organizations and how they do things. So it's not just her experience I could pull from. I could call her and say, hey, what have you seen done elsewhere? And, she had just so much to offer.
It's really interesting because some CIOs are just super amazing at transforming process. Some are just really good on the technology side. Some are very, very few, but some are really good at finance. And it's like when you go into identifying where your soft spots and your weaknesses are. And I think sometimes we think we just go out and just go take a class and learn it. And I think the faster way to do it is to go actually find someone who's done it before and model, because they're actually looking for the same thing in reverse. And so it's interesting. I think we can shorten our learning curve by actually finding really high performing people in the gaps that we think that we have in our experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My previous boss was our chief operating officer.
Okay.
And so operations folks, they think a little differently, I think, than commercial for sure. And, one of the challenges we always had was trying to, operations versus commercial, how do we get the same level of attention? Because the commercial folks are bringing in the revenue, but really they can't do what they're doing. The delivery is happening on the operations side. So it's that challenge of, how do I would call him a lot and say, okay, how do we get the same level of attention for the things we're doing for your group so we can get the funding? And it's part of a challenge here too. The commercial side tends to get a lot of the funding, a lot of the attention, where the operations side really needs the investments to be able to deliver. And so I pick up the phone and call him and say, how do we balance that? How do I get the attention that these unsupported groups need in order to get the funding and what we need to be able to kind of help grow the company? So, a different perspective than I would, call someone who is heavy on the finance side, or someone who knows how to paint a nice picture on the vision and the strategy. That's when I would call my consultant friend and say, hey, I know you do a lot of PowerPoints and you're always selling concepts. How do I put my IT strategy on a page so it's going to resonate,
Oh, that's amazing. Because that's not, I find that's not a strength. It's presenting.
Yeah.
And if you only have a couple minutes to present, really thinking through that approach, and is this going to be a visual impact? Am I going to visual with a primary visual powerful image with then a supporting more tactical support of that? That is a big, I often talk about 10x thinking, why not? It doesn't have to be 10x revenue always or profits. It can be, how do I 10x improve this process? When I was my roommate out of college, I went to Penn State, and my roommate was a basketball player. I was a track guy. So we're always really competitive, but he got in the technology field about 4 years after I formed Red Zone. Red Zone's 18 years old. So he got started around 14 years ago. And they're literally 10 times bigger than we are. 10 times. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing, David? And so, but, we share and collaborate. He's in Atlanta and I'm up here. So we're doing a lot of the similar things, but it's by those really tough, pernicious challenges, and a lot of times it's centered around human beings. How are you solving this? How are you being a better leader? And I learned quite a bit from him. And I'm doing some things that he wishes he were doing. And that's the interesting thing. We think we're always pulling from others, but they're actually pulling from you a little bit as well, because there's something you're doing that is appealing to them. There's something about you. So anyway, that's kind of I love this topic because I'm in this exponential world we're in. It's we're only faced with these big challenges. Like you right now are taking on, let's talk about what you're taking on right now and the difference. Let's talk about the scale of the issues you're challenging with now versus where you were just a couple months ago.
Okay, sure. So with Amtrak, my role here is I'm responsible for corporate and operations technologies, which are largely the inward-facing technologies. But we're running trains, and it's a fairly complex operation.
I love trains.
And well, until I started working here, I didn't know there was so much happening behind the scenes to make the trains run on time sometimes, but really more importantly, safely. And with all the coordination that needs to happen. So it's just amazing, the behind the scenes operation, which, I'm still learning, but I'm fascinated by how much it takes to really run this organization. And with 500 stations around the country, thousands of trips a day, millions of passengers a year, it's a very large scale organization. And it was part of why I came here, because my previous companies, I was with US Silica when I started, was about a half a billion revenues. When I left, it was about 1.6. So I was there about 5.5 years. I grew with the company. It still was a fairly large company. In some ways operated still as a smaller company. In other ways was growing and maturing with its scale. But I had the opportunity to grow with the company, which I find is different than kind of coming in to a new organization, which is much larger in scale, and sort of navigating and figuring out, who do I call? Growing with the company, who to call for everything, how the processes work, you kind of know the ins and outs. And then you come somewhere where, my previous company, we had 3,000 employees. Here it's 20,000. And just the process is
scale.
It's scale. It's the dollars. My budget here is, 4x what it was previous. My team is multiples of what it was previously. So it's just a much larger, everything is bigger. And I had to get my head around that, because there were projects that I had implemented at previous companies, and we're trying to tackle similar projects. And my previous ways of thinking, my assumptions, it didn't cost that much or take that long. Why is it so complex here? You really have to sometimes take your judging hat off and try and understand, okay, maybe there's more to it. And maybe there's not. Maybe we're making it complicated, but you can't jump to those conclusions. You really have to understand the business and the operation and sort of what it's all about and why we do things the way we do. And then kind of say, okay, now I can make an informed decision. But I've found I've had to abandon some of my old assumptions and, I guess, quick perceptions on things, and say, okay, let me take a little time to really kind of learn and understand before I jump to these conclusions.
But entrenched businesses don't change by typically the internal current thinking, or they would already have changed.
Right.
And so,
right.
So, it's like a stagnant pond in the middle of the woods, needs a fresh stream in it to kind of reinvigorate. I'm curious, though, as you land, do you think that your models of thinking that you've been able to apply previously for the growth, do you think some of those models were quite successful models, and that you'll be able to, even though the scale is bigger, essentially the same fundamental thinking you can apply?
I do. And actually, I think that's why I was brought here. We talked earlier about one of my mentors, the one who gave me that opportunity, the big project with the 50 countries and all of that.
I'll sleep better at night.
I'll sleep better at night. So he actually called me and said, hey, there may be an opportunity. And he's now my boss here at Amtrak. And, I think so that confidence he had earlier and the delivery that I had before. And then we've kept in touch over the years, and he knows the things I've done. And I think that's why, he and some of the leadership team here were interested in bringing some of that to say, hey, we do want some outside thinking, and we want someone to challenge the assumptions. And there's a lot of leaders here as well. The leadership has changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. New CEO came in a couple of years ago, Richard Anderson, and he's really changing the culture and changing the perceptions and really driving break-even operations. So the whole, I think, premise behind a lot of that is, let's bring in new ways of thinking. Let's challenge the norms, and the company's open to it. The good news is I do see that top-down leadership that is ready for change and has actually been doing this since his arrival. So there have been a lot of good changes. I think there's still an appetite for a lot more, and a recognition that there can be a lot to be gained by challenging the norm and the way we've done things in the past.
So culture, you mentioned the word culture, which is a mysterious topic, but it's coming up. That and the last lunches have been collaboration, culture, and it's interesting. I just cut off an interview just a couple hours ago, and he said, the Nobel Prizes in the past used to be handed out to individuals. Now, a big chunk of them are handed to teams of individuals. And you got to wonder why. I think I know why, but it's interesting that trend for the super high performing breakthroughs that are getting the prizes. It's not the Einsteins necessarily. It's a team, and they're assigning that Nobel Prize to 2, 3, 4-person teams. And so to get those really big breakthroughs moving forward, do you think that it's going to have to be the leadership of the future is going to have a culture of teams and collaboration?
Definitely. The whole idea of collaboration is huge. I'd say if you go back to what's one of the key success criteria for a lot of these big change initiatives, you have to have collaboration. And for IT and the business, we really need to be joined at the hip, have that partnership, and the team really has to be on board. So I completely agree. I mean, I don't think an individual certainly can't do things alone. You can't do things if you don't have a good team behind you. And that's true both on the business side and the IT side. And it's tough because it's interesting here because I see people who've been here 35, 40 years. And if you think about in that time, how much change they've seen in the organization, how many different cultures have they gone through, and, trying to change that. And, some of those folks are very open to change and just sort of gotten used to change is the norm, and then you have folks who just recently started. So I think blending all of that and finding the right mix, when we think about the team, you want that mix. You want the people who really have the tribal knowledge and know where all the bones are buried. And then you want the folks who've seen it done differently elsewhere and might come in with those new ideas. So I think if you get those synergies and everyone's kind of operating together, you just have so much more probability of success.
How critical is it the team leaders that you recruit for your team, either that you're pulling up within the entrenched folks that are within an organization, and not just here, but your previous as well? And then how often do you just you want to pull in, kind of like someone pulled you in fresh? How often do you just, we just need some fresh leadership here? Like, how do you go through that kind of thinking process?
Well, I think it's a mix. I think as opportunities present themselves, if I know there are gaps, if I look at the current organization and I say, okay, there's a gap here, we don't have someone who does X, or I know someone who's really good at that and could really, do well here, that's where I might think to bring new folks in, but, sort of carefully, because just like me, I was, sensitive to knowing, being, I don't want to be the person who came in because someone. I think you want to be viewed as, okay, we can learn a lot. So who are those new folks we can bring in who can fill gaps that we have in the organization, because maybe we need a different way of thinking, or we need someone who has done, different things in different industries and has kind of seen multiple ways and could come in and say, hey, I think this is probably what would work here. So, I think it has to be a balance. I was fortunate in US Silica because we were growing so fast and I had so many gaps and holes to fill. I was able to pull from a lot of people I'd worked with in the past and said, well, that person's a great project manager and this person really knows infrastructure. And I have somebody who just is great at process and we have a ton of processes to fix. So, and I was able to go kind of pull all those key people in and build an organization. But I think when you come into an established organization, you don't have as many, opportunities. You kind of have to look at what are the strengths you have, how do you capitalize on those, and then where do we have gaps, and how do I strategically fill those? Being a little conscious that you don't want to make too much change all at once.
How do you communicate from a culture perspective? How do you communicate your personal vision within the context of the overall organization? Is there anything you do that helps build collaborative nature or culture of teamwork? Or is there, and if some of the interviews I've talked to people and they do like a little mini video podcast where they take their cell phone and they kind of deliver a message of the week, or a message of the day. So I always find that really interesting because again, it's somebody that does it really naturally because it's them. They're not in the CIOs just kind of does it because they want, to scale that message into the organization. But it's not like the CEO's directive. It's more just kind of keeping everybody on the IT team kind of aware of what's going on. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you do that's kind of unique to you that is kind of like your special sauce?
I don't do selfie videos. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if there's anything unique or special, but I think it's just consistency. It's trying to make sure that I'm always, kind of the consistent message, tying back to the same themes, making sure that everything we do sort of resonates. To me, business partnership is the big important part, and making sure that we're putting our business hat on. We're thinking like our customer. And so if, whenever I have those opportunities as I'm working with my team or with others in the organization, and, it a lot of times will come up when you have a difficult situation, and emotions tend to get involved,
Sure.
And just as again, recent example with a challenging go live, and you have folks who are getting emotional about what's going on and kind of forgetting, step out of your own zone for a minute and think about your customer and what impact this is having on them, and put their hat on. And then maybe that helps us think about things. We're not so IT centric. We think about it a little differently. So I think whenever those opportunities arise, just trying to kind of reinforce the same theme and coming back to, think like your partner, think like your customer. I'll have to think about this.
No, but it's interesting that you said that, because you're thinking like your customer and your internal customer. Uh-huh. And it is the previous story I just mentioned was a CIO of a large pharmaceutical company, and she said, I used to envision the bandages that were placed on the patients that were of this particular unit, and how the decisions were actually impacting the bandage delivery of the burn victims. So this particular business made bandages for burn victims. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty powerful. But it's the same thing. It's similar to what you're saying. Is that what is this impact going to be for your internal customer, and putting yourself in their shoes, and what's the impact there? And it's a very empathetic approach to it. But there's no doubt that it oozes, there's a vibe to that that's very powerful.
Well, and I hear that even this morning. I hear comments like, IT doesn't understand. We have trains to run. If our systems are down, trains don't run. And funny that just this morning I said, well, we support marketing systems as well, the website, the mobile app, we have, and if those are down, they have to be up 24/7. They're critical. But the response I got from this person in operations was, yeah, but if those are down, trains still run. And I thought, well, that's a very good point. So you sort of have to really put yourself in their shoes. And this was coming on the heels of some reorganization that we've done, where we're pulling some folks in from the business who were in IT roles into my organization and saying, hey, if you're doing IT type things, you need to be in IT. And the concern is that, do we really understand the impact of systems not being up 24/7 and not being, running all the time? Because in the operations world, they're round the clock, things have to be perfect,
Wow.
Or trains don't run, passengers get unhappy,
Sure.
Kind of disrupts the whole system. So it was just a different way of thinking. And, again, I found myself saying, okay, I need to put that hat on and reinforce that within the broader IT organization, because it goes back to the culture. Are we thinking of ourselves and the company with the company hat on? Or are we just thinking about, the IT centric view of the world?
It's really interesting because you also mentioned marketing, and it's interesting stories around marketing, but it's like each constituent within your organization has a different need in many respects, and that the marketing has a different set of deliverables and a different set of importance values to them. And I imagine you have to put on like multiple hats between looking at those systems versus there, and then still coming across empathetically the fact that I got trains and millions of passengers, but then I'm trying to influence millions of passengers at the same time. So it's that culture is interesting, the way you frame that.
Yeah. You always have to serve both needs. So it's that fine line, always walking.
So what kind of questions do you were hoping desperately that I'd ask you, and you're hoping I'd get to that I haven't so far, that you think that would be important for other CIOs or potential CIOs listening, that is important to you?
One thing I thought about after we talked last time is around, how do you make these large transformation projects successful? And actually, since we last met, I heard a speaker. I don't know if you're familiar with James Dallas. He was CIO with Medtronic and with Georgia Pacific, and he was recently a speaker at the Capital CIO ORBIE Awards. And very fascinating to listen to. And he talked a lot about the challenges of CIOs these days. And one of the aspects he talked about was with this transformation, and kind of what we talked about, how do you get people on board? He used a statistic that really surprised me. He said only 16% of business transformations are successful.
17%?
16%.
16%.
Which is not a very good success rate, right? But he talked about this common definition of success and making sure you have a shared vision and you have that buy-in and support from the top down. But he also said, you've got to be truthful and transparent with people. And, I think a lot of times when we're doing these transformation projects, the reason we don't get the business participation or enthusiasm for it because they're fearful that it means job loss. And he was saying, just be upfront. Yes, we're going to eliminate 80% of these roles, but you can be a part of the change. And there's these other opportunities, or you kind of offset it. So it's not to kind of ignore that this is going to have a major impact, but just be upfront, get their ideas, get them engaged, start that transformation, that change management early, and don't underestimate the importance of it. And the transparency and the truthfulness was the part that sort of struck me. And I just thought about that in terms of, the fortunate thing is here, there's so many other ththings, once you have efficiencies, there's so many other things that you can take those resources and apply them to go work on. So I don't think there's a fear that trying to be more efficient means, we're going to lose our jobs. But I know in a lot of places that's the case. And I thought that was an interesting takeaway from that speech. But I was just trying to think of, what is the most important leadership trait that you need when you're trying to transform, organizations. And I thought about, I just kind of thought about that it's about that, making those connections, kind of goes back to the relationships, being transparent.
The thing that sticks out with you when I talk to you, and then I've seen kind of a pattern emerging, is do you notice we haven't talked about all the cool technologies,
right? But
your success, I'm sure if we went into the technology, you could tell me about some stuff that gets you excited about the tech part of it. And I don't want to put that off limits, but It's not, when you and I were prepping for this, it's about transformation of the process of the business. And the folks I feel have the longevity and the real impact within their organizations from the digital tech leadership perspective. They have that focus. And the technologies, because I feel like we're Merlins. We have the technologies are so powerful at these days. So it's just a matter of how we deploy those technologies. But it's the second question. The first question is, how is the business operating and how can I improve the business and where from the efficiency? And then I deploy the technology. And it sounds like very academic, like we've heard this before, but I think we have to be reminded of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think because I started my career in process improvement, I always look there first. And, technology to me, you can't just throw technology at a bad process. You really have to look at how do we improve the process and then optimize it with technology, make it even better. There are times where it's appropriate to say, let the technology drive the process.
Sure. Okay. I see that. Sure.
I see, where it's standard, everybody.
Because the technology is so well thought through, you can slot your process into it and clean it up at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. And if you look at it, there's nothing unique to our company in the way we do, say payroll.
Sure.
Sure. Payroll systems are mature. They're, well established. They're prevalent everywhere. And they, a lot of times they can dictate the process, just as an example. But where it's our secret sauce and something unique to our company, you really have to understand the process and optimize the process and then look at, okay, is there a technology that can make it more efficient? With AI and sensors and IoT and all these kind of technologies that are coming up or actually have been around, but, are becoming more prevalent, that's where I think you can get a lot of process efficiencies. But if you're just collecting information and you don't know what you're going to do with it, what decisions you're trying to make, how you're going to process that, who's going to make those decisions, what's important, so you really have to look at I believe you have to kind of look at the process, understand the process, and then look at what is the appropriate technology rather than saying, hey, it's a cool new gadget. Now, how do I force that into my organization so that I can, play with a new tool?
I also think the thing that sticks out for you is courage. That resonates to me because I think having the courage to step into process means you're stepping into issues with people.
Yes.
And you've had that multiple times. I think that is something, because the IT leadership position is not very old. It's still, 1995 was the first browser. Like the first time we could actually use a real internet was 95. So it's not that old, not that long ago. But like the CFO, COO, CEO functions are ancient. They go back maybe to Babylon. So it's like it's a relatively new position, but courage, I think, is one of the things that I think has resonates with me as far as what you've taken on.
Yeah, I do agree. And it's funny because it goes back to the fear comment earlier, fear of failure and being willing to
cross the I's and dot the T's and how deep you go.
Yes. But you're right. People, I've heard it said and a lot of IT experiences. If it wasn't for our customers, we'd be just fine.
Right.
So, if it wasn't for our end users, we wouldn't have any issues. Right. But no, we have, people are a big part of the process. People, process, technology, probably in that order. Right. So I think you have to get the people right. We didn't talk much about talent, but that's another key is you have to have the right people. And I guess we talked about, how do you fill gaps within the organization, and do you bring new folks in or develop those that you already have? But I think just in general, recognizing that, and these days, at least in this area, good talent is hard to find. It's so competitive. So, trying to.
But one thing I didn't ask you, I think it's really important, is how long do you? And this is a tougher question, but I was kind of where I was going with the last question, is how long would you wait before you identify this is the wrong talent for the wrong position? No matter what, it has to be replaced.
Right.
Or I have to put that person in an area that's not going to negatively impact what I'm trying to do, because their skills are aligned with this area. Like, how long do you wait? And that's a hard question to ask, but what's your gut instinct saying that how long you wait for that? Or is it just case by case?
So I'll give you it depends. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it depends. Do I have budget to go out and get new resources? What's the impact? Do I have someone who is so critical to the organization, but just not the right fit? But I can't afford at this time, given other things that are going on, to make a change. So unfortunately, I think it really does depend on the situation. But I guess the answer is it depends, but not too long.
Yeah, not too long. That's good. That's good. Okay. Because I think people get paralyzed. Back to being paralyzed about the I's and the T's and the dots. Just like, I'm such a good leader. Let's say a caliber leader, I'm going to make this C+ person a B+ just by the force of my will.
Yes.
And I mean, as I get older and older, I'm like, you know what? I can't fix everybody. And so I'm wondering, do you try to fix people for a certain amount of time and then just kind of see, does that water level rise? Or do you just say, you know what? I'm not going to be perfect with a team. I'm going to try to get everybody to B. And then hopefully a couple B+ rise up.
And I was going to say, I think the reality is you just can't. It's very difficult to build a team of all A players. And there's also some danger in that, because A players want to be at the next level. So then you get suddenly everyone's competing to move up, and you need some steady eddies. You need some people who just come in every day, get it done. You can rely on them. So I think a good mix, but then you have to recognize the people who aren't quite there or just aren't the right fit. And then, to what extent do you develop them? I think, again, it depends on how confident am I that they can get there? How big are the gaps? Do I have an urgent need to get that gap filled? Sure. So
the imperative of leadership, right?
Right.
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Judith, and this is going to be great for everybody to listen to and learn from. I think it's a learning experience to hear your trajectory and how you've been successful moving forward. So there's no doubt that you're going to continue to be successful here and in the future.
Well, I appreciate it, Bill, and really enjoyed my time with you as well.
Great.
Thanks
great.
for inviting
Until
me.
next time. Thank you. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.